Welcome back, everybody, to the Innovative Agency. Sharon Toerek here with you again. And I'm really excited about today's conversation for a couple of reasons. First of all, love talking with women agency owners, and foremost, but we're going to be talking about something that gets bantered about quite a bit in the agency community, and that's, I think, impact, and specifically tying impact to the work that you all actually do for your brand clients on a day-to-day basis. And today's guest has got some specific points of view about attribution and how we talk about it in the digital and media sphere. And I can't wait to get her point of view out to all of you and to get the conversation started. So, Cimin Cohen is the CEO and founder of, oh my gosh, it just blanked, Cimin. Introduce your agency. Idea
Idea
Peddler.
Peddler.
Idea Peddler. Oh my God, I rolled it off my tongue just 2 seconds before we hit record. But you are a creative and media agency in the Southwest of the US, correct?
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about how you came to be an agency founder, first of all.
Well, it was not my 8-year-old little girl self dream to be an agency founder. But I came up through media. I studied it at the University of Texas at Austin, Hookham. And then I went up to Starcom up in Chicago straight out of school. I got to work on brands like Kraft Grill and Microsoft and Best Buy. I came back to Austin and worked on the ad tech side. I went back to Chicago again and worked at Mindshare, and then went back to Starcom again. So I did the agency tour of duty, and I had such a love-hate relationship with it. But overarchingly, I got to see amazing work from really, really smart people. And when I left agency life, I kind of was like not sure what I was going to do next, and maybe anything other than an agency. And then about 2 weeks later, I got a call from somebody that was like, "We need a media person for a pitch." And so I was like, I'm getting out of the media game. I'll try to see if I can find somebody else. And ended up working and collaborating with this group. And we together pitched the New Mexico Tourism Department. That was 11 years ago now. We still have that client that we work on together today. So it was kind of happy accidents and a series of happy accidents that kept happening. And once I got into what I call like mid-sized indie land, I recognize the like vast difference between these clients and Fortune 100 brands. And I was hooked, and the clients are lovely, and the work's lovely, and building a team has been amazing. And so I haven't been as invigorated as I am this year in the past 11 years. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about sort of the landscape right now for independent agencies and how it feels now where we are with all the holdco activity, with all the roll-ups that are happening, not only agencies being rolled up, but media outlets being bought up by holdcos, and just there's a ton of M&A activity in the small agency marketplace as well. And so, what, from the perspective of an agency owner, what are you seeing, and how is it landing with you, given your media focus?
I am really interested in how it's impacting teams. And by and large, the employees and the talent doesn't like it. And that cascades down. And I think clients want and deserve and will chase the people who produce great work.
Mhm.
And those people are only going to stay in kind of PE backed, money squeezed environments for so long. They came here because they're creative, they want interesting work, they want interesting problems, and they want freedom and exploration in how they solve those problems and in pursuit of the best answers. I look around at my team, and I'm surrounded by young professionals who want to be able to speak their mind authentically and openly. They want to be able to follow the trail of what is new and now, what's happening, go test and learn around new channels, new experiences, new media platforms. And if you're at a hold co or you've got misaligned incentives as an agency, it's very hard to attract the talent who's going to do that and who's going to go find what the next new great advertising medium is, because you are beholden to filling your pockets in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, the big rub that I see is just this lack of ability to truly independently recommend what's the next best thing for the client as opposed to what's your next product that you have to sell.
Mm-hmm.
What's your minimum spend threshold that you have to meet to get your kind of agency preferred rate or the principal buying dynamics. There's just in media there are so many ways in which agencies skim, and in large part that's been in response to clients. We've all seen some of the headlines, clients being completely unreasonable in payment terms and agency fee models. And agencies provide a service, they should be paid to do that and be paid well, and you want to keep that talent, and so it should be a healthy dynamic there. But I just worry about all the ways in which great talent is getting turned off from agencies when they see um, what's really happening under the covers at a lot of specifically media agencies where the recommendations are not actually what's always in the best interest of the client. I think that's only a matter of time before that gets back to clients and they really start to say, okay, I can't abide anymore, even though it's easy, or this is the hold code, or this is the answer, or this is the big guy in the space, and they've been rolling up, even though they're not a hold co yet, they're PE owned, and they'll start to see that kind of stuff happen and have the staffing turnover and all the problems start to cascade down into just bad execution, bad strategy.
Mm-hmm. That is actually a great segue into something I wanted to ask you about, which is what's your point of view on sort of how much this is leveling the playing field a bit for smaller independent agencies? I mean, you could argue on the one hand that innovative and nimble helps you put you in a better spot to compete. On the other hand, I could argue, and I hadn't thought about this angle until you said what you just said, that it's not perhaps a level playing field quite yet in terms of access to media opportunities and buying opportunities and pricing benefits and things like that. So, how do you feel about the state of the playing field, I guess, for small independent agencies?
I think there's still a long way to go in having everybody's cards on the table to be comparing price to price the same way with big holdcos. Um, and I will say that I've been very surprised, although I guess I shouldn't be, how many indies are actually, they have some other financial structure other than clients paying them. They
Mhm.
either have investors or benefactors or whatever the dynamic is, that there are other people involved. Um, I think there are quite few indies in the space that we're in, which is our only two stakeholders are our clients and our employees. And so that playing field really still needs to get leveled to have that transparency of like, who else are you answering to and um, under what guise. The pricing, if you're Coca-Cola, of course, you're gaining the benefit of pricing advantage for things like the upfronts and holdco pricing. But by and large, the way that media is bought anymore, there is not a pricing advantage that the client is benefiting from. It's the agency who's benefiting from it. So if
Mhm.
you've got a deal with Meta for your minimum ad spend for the year, that is not showing up in the CPMs. That's showing up back to the agency for meeting that. And this was happening when I left big agency a long time ago, that there was all over the headlines, the kickbacks.
Mhm.
So I think that playing field gets leveled when there's increasing transparency. And that's become a hard thing to do nowadays, I think, for some reason. So um, hopefully trying to bang that drum a little bit.
So, what inspired you, Samin, to put thought leadership out around this whole issue of attribution? And then let's talk a little bit about your body of work around the attribution illusion, because I think it's something we really do need to talk about as a community in the agency space.
Sure. What inspired it was a little bit of a confluence of events. So we saw that our clients were experiencing higher and higher return on ad spend, ROAS, as has become just what I call the crack cocaine of the media industry in the past, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So ROAS kept going up, and there was always pressure, higher ROAS, higher ROAS. But it was not correlative with business results. And so you could see that ROAS was going up and business results were staying the same, or ROAS would go down and business results would stay the same. And so we decided to dig into that a little bit more. Around the same time, multiplier effect had come out and was starting to put real evidence-based, science-backed research behind what was actually driving brand growth. And a lot of ROAS is really built around audience segmentation and precision targeting. And if you look at the multiplier effect and what 30 years of ad effectiveness studies have shown, is that that's the lowest lever of driving brand growth and brand profitability over time, at 1.1 compared to creative quality at 12x. And then we were also just experiencing these anomalies in data sources where we had audience pools that we were, whether we were ingesting data or using data for attribution modeling for things like geolocation attribution. So if you're marketing a destination or a venue or a resort, seeing how many people actually show up there. There's lots and lots of tools that sell that data from data brokers. And those that would show the volume of visitation, we saw that those panels were being cut in half and getting very, very tiny. And when we would probe and ask questions about why, it was kind of papered over. But then we had some partners who were really willing to be honest about what they were seeing in the data
Mhm.
quality and integrity. So we started to just kind of like pull at this thread. And the more we pulled at this, we were like, okay, all these things are really connected and nobody's putting these puzzle pieces together. So we just kind of took it upon ourselves. There's a lot of this information that's been shared and discussed kind of in independent lines of study or lines of communication, but not really aggregated together to show the whole picture of what's really happening and the consequences for media buying and for measuring the effectiveness of media buying.
So for one thing I'm curious about is was the delta between what the ROAS was saying and between what the actual business results were for brands something that the clients surfaced with you on with regularity, or was this something that the agency was proactively measuring and noticing while it was monitoring the campaigns it was working on? How did this sort of surface in terms of this gap between, the math saying one thing here and another thing here?
Yeah, I think that's why it's A, hard for people to digest and accept, and B, why it's still a problem today is
Hmm.
because a lot of people are so zoomed in on weekly numbers. And that's the case that we were in with our clients, where we're looking week over week and we would see ROAS lift and they'd say, like, great, I see this happening in my business too. And they would be correlative on a micro basis.
Oh.
Then you would zoom out for an entire season or 6 months or a year and all the facets of the business. And this particular kind of enclosed ecosystem of digital media running specifically for this line of business could be successful, but it was not cascading to the overall success of the business. And that's when we needed to start to look at, zoom out a little bit to see, okay, what would drive overall business growth rather than just this one line of business, this one product, this one service, where we can see kind of micro improvements, but not actually to the degree that the ROAS is claiming credit for. It's not a 7 to 1, 15 to 1. It's more like a 2 to 1 when you take an aggregate the total business versus the
Hmm.
impact. And that's where when we've layered in other attribution tools outside of independent walled gardens that won't, so you can't cross functionally look at those attribution drivers. When you hire a third party whose job it is to only measure and not place any media, and they only get compensated for measurement studies, in some instances, we've actually found that ROAS overall for the business is much higher than what is reported in these walled gardens. So it's not always a bad news story that ROAS is being over reported. Sometimes it's just an inaccurate and incomplete picture, not necessarily a negative one.
Hmm. So you have some theories about what's behind all of this because it's not just any one problem, right, causing the disconnect. Um, and there's multiple factors at play here. One of which is sort of what you call suspicious segments. And that's this idea that it's hard to know um, because the panel sizes are smaller now, really what's happening. So you can explain that better than I, but suspicious segments is one sort of factor that's causing this gap or this delta. And what does that mean? And what can we do about it, I guess, as agency leaders?
Yeah, well, to just zoom out even to 30,000 feet before we get to suspicious segments, the thing that has become so pervasive is this wishful thinking that there are precision audience targeting opportunities everywhere you turn, and that that's all that we as marketers should be doing now, because why else should we? Because now there's this massive tech stack and ad tech, and this is the modern way of the marketer. But the problem becomes these suspicious segments and the addressability of these precision audience
Mhm.
targeting segments. So every time a marketer gets back hands on keyboard, gets back in the platform, they will immediately see that you get unstable data segments to target. It will tell you this is too narrow, we can't target it. And that's in large part because the addressability has gone away, which I'll talk about, but also because privacy regulation.
Mhm.
Um, for people who remember the Cambridge Analytica debacle with Meta when it was Facebook long ago, there have been a series of legislations at the state and abroad that have created an environment where this hyper precision targeting is not happening at scale the way that 80% of today's ad tech stack is created. So what that means is that we may have a panel of data. Let's call, best case scenario, we get a precision audience targeting segment at 1 million kind of IDs. As soon as you put that into any environment that is meant to go target that audience, the addressability of that ID being able to be found again on the internet is more like 25%.
Mhm.
So the mapping of that isn't real, but people keep taking your money telling you, oh, I can definitely do this audience targeting segment. What they're not saying is, I can do 25% of this and 75% with filler of anything else. I can't really tell you what that is.
Mhm.
And if you're Meta, you're calling it a lookalike audience. That's a black box. I can't tell you anything about what's inside of it.
Right.
Um, and so, what this kind of actually started to naturally pull towards, which will be the follow on paper to this, is about the amount of invalid bought, made for advertising traffic that's happening across those kinds of environments where they're serving inventory, filler inventory, um, to get clicks, purely to get clicks and drive traffic that is not ultimately benefiting the brand.
So, as somebody who is in the business of legally advising
Mm-hmm.
marketers, my perspective on this is that the data privacy climate is not going to get any simpler to navigate. We're having conversations in the US now about potentially a federal standard at some point, but it hasn't happened yet. And um, so you've got 50 potential sets of rules, right, to navigate. You can play to the most strict as a conservative measure, but there's still 50 different potential sets of data privacy regulations in the US. And then you have GDPR, and then some other random regulations here and there. I don't see that pressure getting any easier for marketers. And so what is the answer now? What is an agency owner or leader or account planner supposed to say to the brand about what a reasonable expectation looks like in terms of impact of a media buy or a media campaign, an ad spend?
What we're seeing is that the most forthright answer is there is still addressability within individual closed walled garden environments. If you can manage and maintain your own data segments and deploy those. So if you think about Meta, they actually are well suited to have a high volume. They have a slew of other problems. But they are actually well suited where you've given them your email address, you've given them your privacy consent, and they own the inventory you're running on. So they control all the factors of where that runs. Their addressability is pretty high. The same thing when you look at running specifically in retail platforms where they own the environment that you're running in, as well as your login information. So we'll probably see more cropping up of these individual entities built around private data lakes. Another
Mhm.
example is Amazon. They know everything about you and they have Amazon Prime. So where there is data that is owned or a unique licensing agreement, another partner we work a lot with is Adara Sojourn. They have direct relationships with the Marriotts of the world and travel providers. So when you have that unique email device ID or mobile phone ID, that can be built upon for an ID graph that's pretty strong. Now, deploying that, you want to be in an environment where they have as close to inventory management as possible.
Mhm.
So, what's short of that, and the problem that we're seeing today is everybody rushed off to make their own DSP or their own, a lot of the things that are happening with holdcos are they're having their whole own DSP environment and they're not letting data in or out from other people and they want to own the whole thing. The reality is they don't own the data and they
Mhm.
don't own the inventory on the other side. And
I
so
was going to
that
ask
won't
you
work.
about that. I mean, absolutely, they don't own it. Right. That's
The
interesting.
closest we've seen is Publicis with this LiveRamp acquisition. LiveRamp also, though, is an identity match process. They don't own the data that's coming into it. They're kind of a cleanliness of that data. They are not the source of the data where you go agree to put in your email address. So I think
Hmm.
there's still a long way to go on getting that cleaned up to be totally usable. I think Epsilon has potential, but short of that, you know, you need to, that's why independence as a media agency has never been more important because I need to be able to go buy on any given platform that's changing by the day, as opposed to being constrained to only my tech stack, my DSP, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah. I have my own sort of cynical point of view on this, but I would love to get yours. And maybe it's a rosier picture from your perspective. But do you think that we are going to see in the near future an increased level of transparency around data privacy compliance amongst any of sort of the big holders, if you will, of data? Not the non-private walled gardens, single source walled gardens, but um,
Like the data
they're
brokers.
telling their buyers that they are complying, but there's really no way to verify whether a marketer is safe believing that there's compliance. So, what do you think?
I think one of two things will start to happen. On the one hand, and this is much more in your sphere that you can talk about, on the one hand, there is legislation coming down on big tech, on AI, on social, on Meta, and New Mexico has been early and often in legislating Meta and trying to get some right setting about social media access, data sharing. And so it's not exactly in that square of data privacy legislation. They're starting from um, the reaching children environment and working their way in through there. I think though that could be the very tip of the next steps because as soon as you start to say this is addictive, creating bad behavior, creating bad outcomes, you can start to then chip away at the
Mm.
foundation. So I think we're in the early stages of that, maybe leading into more legislation on data privacy for those big walled gardens. I think the other thing that could happen is on the counter side, which is consumers. We may be close. I think I don't know how long our current social and kind of broad internet structure works when there's no verifying anything anymore. If
Hmm.
anything can be any AI generated video, any AI generated content, there's enough information out there about the bad actors and bots. Um, I think that people's desire to for these social platforms started from real connection, authentic contacts with your social graph. It's skewed so far from that, and I don't think people are there to watch random content. They may
Hmm.
be in other environments. YouTube for sure is an environment where people are there to watch a lot of random content.
Yeah.
But social graphs necessarily were started to be social in that way. And so I think we could see a pullback of the amount of time spent in these kind of walled garden environments. And what replaces them, I think I'm very bullish on real world. I love what the OAAA has done as branding out of home as the human medium. People who are in events and experiences, those businesses are growing and people are seeing
Hmm.
positive returns in those environments. Um, this is very, very rose colored glasses, but there have been some small kind of indie print publications that are making resurgences in the arts community. And while I don't think that a lot of that digital infrastructure is going away, I think when dollars start to shift to a more balanced approach, like they
Hmm.
should be across all of the facets of media, we will see enough money come out of digital that a lot of that ad tech can't make it. There's too long of a tail of mouths to feed in ad tech today, and some
Yeah.
of those will kind of start to go away when dollars shift into other media.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point about the economic balance of it, but I also think that at some point, um, the trust imbalance has got to tip things over, right? If you can't believe anything you're seeing, then brands aren't going to believe what the media outlets are telling them about who's seeing the impact, the campaigns that they're spending them to get out into the world. And so it sounds like a little bit of fire to get through to get to the other side, but at least it's movement, right, towards transparency. So I hope you're,
Absolutely. And one of the great things that AI has brought to the field is being able to more rapidly build and validate databases for measurement. So, what that means practically is that there's a lot of small and mid market advertisers that can now afford true MMM studies or true qualitative studies, or, take or leave how you feel about synthetic data studies. So, there's just a lot more at your fingertips for much more reasonable cost to be able to go validate what you're seeing from these reports about who you're reaching and the impact of it,
Mhm.
and have a higher degree of correlation with true business outcomes than just what's being self-reported by any given entity. So I think that trust factor has the opportunity to go up when the control shifts back to independent voices, the brands themselves, and having some neutral third party be the arbiter of what's true and what's not.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. So a lot of independent agencies don't have the depth or the breadth of media background as your agency does. They might be similar sized, but if they're focused on creative or they're focused on communications, or what would you say to the leaders of those agencies about the questions they need to be asking and the things they need to be saying to the brands who are relying on them for advice?
I think the hard thing about being an agency owner is you've been very entrepreneurial, and this idea of, I call it a sickness sometimes, I can do it myself, I can do it myself,
Hmm.
is pervasive in all of us. And I have to fight it in myself sometimes in things that we are not good at. We used to do PR and we're like, we don't do PR anymore, to say no to things that we do not do. And so I think for those agency owners who are holding, budgets of media that they don't feel equipped to expertly navigate, it's okay to phone a friend and say, I am not the expert in this field. Please, somebody with the best interest of the client, let's partner together to go execute on this work.
Hmm.
When I think clients trust and respect that, and we've done that with many agencies where we have, a lot of that also has to have trust built in that they're not going to be
Right.
circumvented and all of the rest of that kind of stuff. But if you find an agency partner where you can have that kind of trust, it really ends up servicing the clients much better because you're not constantly on the defensive, knowing in the back of your minds, like, oh, this is not my core range
Hmm.
of focus. If you have media partners that you are buying in house, one of the things I say is ask them about match rates, ask them what data they uniquely own, not what data they buy or they broker, or what do they uniquely own. Um, are there supply chain markups along the line for anything like data, or hands-on keyboard fees or any of those kinds of things, and ask them to lay it all out there as transparently as possible.
That's really helpful. What about things to say to the brand about measuring impact of either the frequency or the actual metrics? Any tips there?
That has been, people get there in their own time. It's like, I shouldn't say it's like children, but it's like children a little bit, like you can tell your own kid this thing for so long, and then as soon as an
Yeah.
outside force says it, they hear it in a different way.
Yeah.
So it's, with your own clients, it's trying to find some outside sources as much as you want to be the expert on saying this is a thing that we should start to consider and do.
Mhm.
Opening the door again to say, okay, this person's an expert in this field, listen to what they have to say, and they don't have anything to gain. I find that to be the best um, breakthrough communication is when you know that the other person on the side of this person on the other side of the table has nothing to gain, and they're
Yeah.
truly an independent voice. So sometimes that's not the agency. Like, some of my clients love to hear me talk about this stuff, and some are like, I would prefer to hear it from somebody else. I'm like, that's okay. I can't.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think that this, media strategy, media buying, media planning is just one of those. I've come to this perspective as sort of an outsider looking in and watching these deals get made between agencies and brands. And this is really one of those areas where, in my view, unless you are truly a specialist in media, strategic alliances, strategic partnerships are really your friend. It's good for the brand. It's good for your agency because you are not delving into, a sea of unknown. And it's good because you can vet your sources of talent in this regard and really create win-win scenarios. So I guess my 2 cents as a non-agency owner is, to the extent you're going to consider a strategic alliance in any area of your business, this is probably a good place to think about doing it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of clients themselves that either started in creative, or they maybe started in operations or marketing. They didn't come up through media. It's almost nobody's
Right.
job other than media people to know this much about this. And
True. Yeah.
so it can be totally overwhelming, but you do want to know that the person that has their hand at the wheel of millions of dollars is
Right.
informed about those things and cares deeply about making sure that those are deployed in like the
Right.
highest integrity way possible.
Right. Yeah. Just like you wouldn't, as a media agency, probably be the best choice for a rebrand of a major consumer facing product, right? So
We don't do logos. Yeah.
we know we all have our lanes, and so
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in that as well. Well, Samin, this has been really I've learned a lot. So this has been educational for me personally, and I think that folks listening, we've given them some really good food for thought on this whole attribution issue and how to at least be fluent in acknowledging that it's a problem and that there's some language about how to explain the problem. And I'd love it if you would share with folks how they can learn a little bit more about your thought leadership around attribution illusion and then your agency. Where can they find out all they need to know about you?
Sure. We can be found on the World Wide Web at ideapeddler.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Cimin Amati Cohen. I'm the only Cimin Amati Cohen on there. And the Attribution Illusion white paper is free to download at theattributionillusion.com. So if you just navigate to that website, you can get the full white paper.
Amazing. Cimin Amati Cohen, I really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much for joining me on the Innovative Agency. And
Thanks,
thanks to
Sharon.
all the rest of you for spending time with us. I am looking forward to seeing you on the next episode. And until then, everybody stay well. Take care all.